And I spoke with two Ohio State University professors about their concerns surrounding Senate Bill 83. You, in a column for the Columbus Dispatch, wrote that this bill is part of the political right's racist, anti-feminist, anti-trans, homophobic, anti-union, anti-immigrant, fake free speech agenda. That is harsh. And supporters of this bill say that the bill is actually about enhancing and encouraging more speech, not restricting or banning it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for asking that. So you want me to comment? There's two ways to look at it, right? What I was trying to do in that op-ed is to say, this is coming from a larger politics. It's claiming to be simply about free speech, simply about openness of discussion, but it's coming from a larger politics. And when we look at all the bills in the State House today, in terms of trans people, trans athletes, in terms of so many things, even the HJR1 and all of that stuff to prevent a ballot on abortion and things like that. When we look at all of that, we see that there's a larger politics that it's coming from, and I wanted people to recognize that. But of course, when we talk about bills, we need to talk about specifics. What's in the bill? What's it actually saying? What's it actually doing? So there's two parts to this. There's the political part and understanding where it's coming from and what's driving it, right? And then there's the part of what's it actually saying. And the other side is also, sometimes they talk about what's the language of the bill, but sometimes they talk about their larger political agenda, anti-CRT, things like that. And so this is really trying to draw that out.
Dr. Hall, I want to ask you about one of the specifics of the bill. It would ban mandatory diversity, equity, and inclusion training. And when you were at this 7-hour hearing testifying along with several other people, there was the suggestion made that this could actually cost colleges and universities federal funding for grant programs and research that's going on.
Well, I'm in engineering, and so our accrediting board, ABET, they require certain diversity training within the curriculum. So depending on what it really means in the bill, that could put us at risk of not being able to be accredited through the main accrediting body. Mm-hmm. Because our students are going to go out and work in a global society, and so they have to understand how to work with a variety of different people. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of baked into our curriculum.
Another thing that the bill would do, it would ban ideological litmus tests in hiring. And Senator Serino said he's concerned about that because he says that the balance of faculty is 90-10, which I presume to mean 90% liberal, 10% conservative. So was an ideological litmus test used when you were hired?
Absolutely not. I teach in world literature, I teach in ethnic studies, and I was hired because of my knowledge of those fields, of the literature, of the culture, of being able to analyze texts. It had to do with questions of knowing the history. It had to do with the questions of my writing and my scholarship. In fact, I think we need to turn this around. This bill is about an ideological litmus test. Show me the research that says 90% of faculty are liberal and 10% are conservative, and then show me the research that says an individual's political position as a private citizen automatically translates into how they teach. I think that's there's a lack of understanding about how we actually conduct our business in the classroom, and a projection of the kind of ideas that we put out. So the ideological litmus test is actually this bill.
And one of the other things he and other conservatives have said is that they want professors to show kids and students how to think, not tell them what to think. Dr. Hall, you're in a science-based, fact-based field. I mean, you have a lot of influence over students. Are you telling them how to think?
I think we're showing them. Yeah, I think engineering is probably not what Senator Serino would be thinking of when he's thinking of these ideas and this, especially this 90-10 split, because we certainly have a lot of conservative folks in engineering. But I think you do have to show them how to solve a problem rather than the solution. Mm-hmm. But there's some things that aren't really up for debate. Like, I'm particularly worried about the climate change being supposedly a controversial topic because, they're just engineering facts that you'd have to teach that have to do with climate change.
And Senator Serino said last week that he's going to change the language on that to make it a discussion about climate policies rather than climate change. And that's one of the changes that he said he's going to make. I want to ask you both here. One of the other things that's in the bill is that faculty would not be allowed to strike.
Right.
Why should faculty be allowed to strike? If students are paying tuition to have you teach them, why should you be allowed to strike?
Right. I mean, let's open that up. Should nurses be allowed to strike? Should any worker be allowed to strike? And I think if we open that up, there's two things that emerge here. First of all, the right to strike and the right to organize is the right of every worker. And that is something that we disagree on, simply. He's not for workers' rights, and we are. The second thing, though, is that there's, again, so many contradictions in this bill. The claim is that faculty are these, just kind of living large, off taxpayer money, and there's that kind of image created. But by this ban on the right to strike, what he actually showed is that we're workers too. And with that, he's brought in the whole union movement. And the union movement, would anyone say the people in the union movement are living large often? No, that's not how we talk about people in the union movement, in the labor movement. So Serino actually has a problem on his hands by talking about this ban on the right to strike.
In our interview last week, Senator Serino said that his takeaway from that 7-hour hearing, where you both were there, was that professors would like to tell legislators, stay out of our sandbox. Don't tell us what to do or how to do it, but keep sending us billion-dollar checks every year. And by the way, we'd like more because professors are underpaid. And he said, as legislators, we have a seat at the table. We're not just check writers. We care about Ohio. We care about higher ed. Let me ask you about that. Do you feel like Senator Serino doesn't understand your work, doesn't respect your work, that there's no common ground here?
Well, I actually heard a lot of the people talking about how we need a better dialogue. I heard the two student body presidents of OSU both mention that. Several of the faculty who had talked said, come visit us, let's sit down and get to work on some of these concerns that people have, and how can we really address them as a team. But I don't think anybody wants to be told what to do, just in terms of the super, fine details, and be micromanaged in terms of how to do their work. So I don't think that's a surprise that people are against that.
When it comes to micromanaging, I want to ask you the same question, but specifically in the area of history, where you as an English professor live a little bit, even micromanaging some of the texts and things that you are told that you must teach to students.
I mean, first of all, on the other question, I just want to say on behalf of the faculty and students, who came, please don't insult them. Please don't say, we don't want you to play in our sandbox, that we're clowns. Please don't do that. Please don't have a hearing that encourages citizens to speak and then say, why did you say what you said? That's insulting and it's dismissive, right? That's the opposite of encouraging a diversity of thought, being able to listen to someone who has something different to say, right? Which we're trained in. So I think I wanted to say that first of all. I think on the question of history, I mean, it's fascinating. There's such a move away from history that some history professors jokingly say, thank God there'll be a history requirement so that people don't graduate without history. So there's some irony about that. But then this idea of prescribing which text we should teach, I mean, that's Big Brother, all over again. We don't need that. But the ironic thing is that he gives us a letter from a Birmingham jail by Martin Luther King Jr. And if you want to talk about woke, I mean, that's a pretty woke text. It talks about structural racism. It talks about fighting back against unjust laws, right? And what I like to say is they want us to read. So now they're going to mandate letter from a Birmingham jail, but they don't want us to tell the history of why he was in jail in the first place.
The bottom line is, would this bill as written, as far as you can tell, encourage more speech, bring in more speech, make conservative students feel more welcome, or will it chill free speech?
I think it will chill the discussion of certain topics, even in engineering when we have things that are supposedly controversial. I mean, I just rather not, as an engineer, I'd just rather not get into all these details. I'd just rather stay away and focus on what I do best. So I think it would chill my discussion, for instance, of any climate change issues.
Definitely it chills speech. It's already doing it. People are already self-censoring themselves in anticipation of this bill being passed.
Now, Senator Serino says some conservative students are censoring themselves.
Right. Sure. I mean, when we look at the record, the faculty who've been fired from places have often been left-wing faculty, especially if they speak on certain issues. That's the reality. We need empirical research on this question. But at the end of the day, everyone is claiming to be the supporter. So I'll just say to our listeners, right? Everyone is claiming to be a supporter of free speech. Everyone is claiming for diversity of thought. The question is, what actually happens in the classroom? That's the real question.
Senator Serino says he and others have spent more than a month working on an amended version of Senate Bill 83 to avoid what he called any unintended consequences. But he says certain things will stay, such as the bans on mandatory DEI training and on ideological litmus tests in hiring. You can see the full interview with Serino from last week and these interviews this week in our archive at statenews.org.